Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So although the Stanley Cup final is still going on, 30 of the NHL teams off seasons are underway, have been underway for multiple weeks or even multiple months if you didn't make the playoffs. So I decided to ask you guys on my Instagram to send me your hot takes. You know, I love when you guys bring that sweet heat with some takes, and I got over like 100, and we're going to go through 20 of them right now. Usually we only do like 12 to 15. We're going to go through 20 because especially in the past month and the last week, we have got a lot of updates regarding certain players' futures. Ehlers apparently wants a trade. Patrik Laine wants a fresh start somewhere else. This morning it came out that Mitch Marner, it's looking like that it's likely that he might honestly get re-signed instead of traded, according to Darren Dreger. So we're going to go through that right now. We're going to go through all your hot takes because there are so many teams that have massive question marks and might end up making some pretty blockbuster trades this summer. It should be pretty exciting. Let's get into it. Up first from Shields, he says the Senators get Ullmark. Now, in looking at this, the Senators definitely need goaltending. I'm not sure they're going to be in the market for one of the bigger names, considering the fact that Korpisalo still has 4 years left at $4 million. I think they're going to give Korpisalo another shot next year. They're going to bring in a veteran, maybe like a probably not Cam Talbot because he was there 2 years ago and flopped, but they might bring in like an Anthony Stolarz or a Brossoit to kind of be a tandem with Korpisalo, but I can't really see them bringing in Ullmark because Ullmark's probably going to need an extension as soon as he gets traded, or at some point he's going to need an extension. And are you going to be paying Ullmark? He's worth $6-7 million. Are you going to be paying that tandem $10-11 million for the next four or five seasons? I think Ottawa not quite this offseason. Next offseason, when there's only 3 years left, and when they probably have more expectations next year, the expectation is to make the playoffs, but I don't think really a lot of people expect to make the playoffs. And also, when looking at it from a Boston Bruins perspective, I'm not sure they're frothing out the mouth to trade Linus Ullmark within the division. Not saying that they're scared of the Ottawa Senators, but if there's a comparable deal, and also I don't even know what an Ottawa Senators deal would look like, if there's a comparative deal sending him to the Metro or out west, they're probably going to go with that instead of a young team that has such horrible goaltending. Don Sweeney saying, here's our former Vezina winning goalie. I don't think that it's that feasible, but I think next offseason, the Ottawa Senators are going to be aggressive in the goalie market if Korpisalo shits the bed yet again. Next up, Isaac, he says, Lou actually makes a trade for Ehlers and clears up salary cap space and signs him to an extension, man. I hope. I am all aboard on the Ehlers train. When looking at him, only 1 year left at $6 million. And I think an extension for him is only going to cost like $7.5, maybe $8 million. You compare that to going out and getting a Mitch Marner. He was going to want like $11 million on top of making 10.9 next year. Patrik Laine, $8.7 million. There's a lot of question marks with him. I would love my New York Islanders to go and get Ehlers. A line of Matt Barzal at Ehlers in transition off the rush would be the most exciting New York Islanders team that I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'm all on a board for this. When looking at it, yes, they're probably going to have to dump a contract, but considering they got kind of like that free second-round pick from the Chicago Blackhawks, it is a later second-round pick, but maybe you package JGP, who has 2 years left at $5 million. I like JGP, but he's like a $3.54 million player at this point. So if you can maybe dump his contract somehow, I think if that means that you instead, if you have a Ehlers deal lined up, if obviously not just dump JGP out of nowhere, you're going to get someone else in a separate deal. But if that's lined up, I think that's a very good plan for the New York Islanders. Anthony says the Panthers won't sign Reinhart. Now, when looking at it, I think at this point, we can assume that the Panthers are most likely going to win the Stanley Cup. And yeah, they're going to have some tough decisions to make because they have around $20 million in cap space with Reinhart and Montour as free agents, as well as multiple of their depth pieces. I think they're going to get it done mainly just because Reinhart fits in so well with that team and so well with their core in terms of age. I think they're going to give him an 8-year deal at around 8.75 million. I think they're going to get a very good deal on it just because that's how Bill Zito operates, and also the no state income tax. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility considering Carter Verhaeghe needs an extension the following year. Sam Bennett's deal's coming up. So maybe they say we're going to get rid of Sam Reinhart while he's coming off a career year. We don't want to pay him then. I can see it, but I just think he just fits so well on that goddamn team. And with the Florida Panthers, you give him that 8-year deal so you can get the cap hit low because, for being honest, the Florida Panthers, although they're still a relatively young team, most of their core is between the ages of 26 to 30, so they don't have this 10-year window like maybe Carolina Hurricanes or Dallas Stars. So you don't really give a shit about the final 3 years of that contract because in 6-7 years, their core is going to be in their mid-30s. So when looking at it, I think if you're Florida, you just get it done and you lock up Sam Reinhart. We got Jason kind of being a Debbie Downer. This offseason is overhyped and will be underwhelming. I get where you're coming from. This has happened in previous offseasons. We expect insane fireworks. One thing that I would say in terms of being positive for this offseason. It is the first year since 2019 that the cap is jumped. What is it? It's going up to $88 million for $4.5 million in terms of salary cap increase. So teams are a little bit more flexible versus last year or prior years. They were just trying to keep all their players, let alone go out and acquire guys, considering you're opening up so much in cap space, around $4 million. I think teams are going to be more aggressive, and just having more cap space will be a byproduct of them being more aggressive. Next up, from Patrick, he says Zegras to the Habs, and this has obviously been rumored, a metric shit ton. Montreal, Cole Caulfield, Trevor Zegras reunion. If the price is right, I can see it. I would not give up, obviously, like the 5th overall or any high prospect like a David Reinbacher or a Lane Hudson for a Trevor Zegras. I don't know. I think, first off, the Ducks just shouldn't trade Trevor Zegras, considering his value has never been lower. I wouldn't hate it. I'd have to see what the price is, but if I'm Montreal, I think I'm kind of set, especially considering they're eyeing a forward in this year's draft. Their top 6 is kind of rounding out. I wouldn't go out and trade for a Trevor Zegras. We got from Laine for Necas. Swap happens. And yeah, you look at it, Don Waddell, former Hurricanes general manager, takes the job in Columbus. Maybe he does some switcheroo. I think the Carolina Hurricanes or the Columbus Blue Jackets might have to eat some money on on Patrick Laine if they want to get this done, considering Necas is the younger, well, he's only a year younger, but also he's far more healthy, far more consistent. I know Laine has a higher ceiling, but yeah, I think this would be a pretty mutually beneficial deal in terms of Martin Necas. Kind of fits their core for them. He's a little bit older, but he's only, 25 years old. So I think that would be pretty solid asset management if Don Waddell could get Martin Necas for Patrick Laine. And if you're the Carolina Hurricanes and you can get Laine at like $6.5 million, considering his upside in terms of goal scoring with the guy like Sebastian Aho that he's previously played on Finnish international teams, I think that swap does make a decent amount of sense. Next up, Dan says, Toffoli to the Rangers. As a Devils fan, I love the area. Rangers need a winger. I agree. Top line right wing is something that needs to be addressed. I think Toffoli would be a good fit, considering the fact he's not going to need some mega deal, probably 3 to 4 years at $5 to $6 million. Not that expensive. And this is a guy that can safely give you 30 and 30 for the most part. And I think on that top line with Chris Kreider, with Mika Zibanejad, that is more than reasonable in terms of that. He might want some more term, and that might be tough with the New York Rangers with the extensions that they have to give out soon in terms of Lafreniere and Shesterkin, but that's definitely an interesting fit. I don't think that they're landing a Sam Reinhart in free agency at $9 million, but Toffoli, in terms of a guy that's around the same ages as Zibanejad, Kreider, Panarin, Trocheck, it makes a lot of sense. That'd be pretty solid. Max says the Oilers managed to move 3 of either Kane, Ceci, Campbell, and Nurse. I think, as much people hate Darnell Nurse, I still don't think that he's going anywhere. In terms of the other 3, I think Campbell buyout is very possible, is very likely. Cody Ceci has 1 year left on his deal. That's a very likely spot. Kane is tough because he's obviously having that sports hernia hip injury right now. 2 years left at $5.1 million. You'd have to attach some assets to trade for him, because I don't think that he's like a locker room guy that like a Chicago or San Jose, who he used to play on, would like want him in terms of a veteran teaching Celebrini and Connor Bedard. So I think that 2 out of the 4 is likely. I think Ceci and Campbell is possible. Kane, I wouldn't be shocked. Nurse, I genuinely would be shocked if they buy him out, and especially if they can find a trade partner for him somehow. So I'd say 2 out of 4. Utah trades for Gensel and Marner from Bobby. I don't think they're trading for both Jake Gensel and Mitch Marner, but I think that it's definitely possible that Utah gets very active this offseason. They have around $40 million in cap space, and I believe Sean Durzi is really their only prominent free agent. Most of their key players are under contract next season. If I was Utah, I'd go for maybe more of a defenseman kind of type. They're really lacking it outside of like Sean Durzi in terms of a top 4 defenseman, but when looking at it, I wouldn't hate them going out and trading for a Marner or a Jake Gensel. But yeah, I think they can be a really sneaky team this season if they go out and trade for a legit star to help develop their guys. And on top of Connor Ingram repeating what he did this year, not being a fluke, repeating it, being a stud. Next up, we got Lash Off Hockey Ninja. Stamkos to Detroit. Steve Yzerman, the guy that obviously, I believe he drafted Stevens. No, I don't know, but he was his first general manager. Was he back then in 2008? No, he's like still playing. But when looking at it, I think that there is obviously that connection with Steve Yzerman, with Steven Stamkos. I wouldn't put any money on this, but out of the potential spots where Steven Stamkos would leave to go, I think Detroit would definitely be in the top 5. They're a team on the rise. Maybe they don't want to give Patrick Kane a ton of money, but they think Steven Stamkos is a higher quality player. Perfectly fine. I mean, he had like 40 and 40 this season, so you really can't go wrong. Michael says, after all the talks and rumors, Marner does not get traded. Now, when looking at this, yes, Darren Dreger came out this morning that Brad Treliving might be more willing to re-sign Mitch Marner instead of trade him. And yeah, it's tough because I don't think you force a Mitch Marner trade. You know what I'm saying? If no one's really offering a ton, considering he's making $10.9 million, he's probably going to want $11.5, $12 million on extension. If the market isn't there, I can understand why you wouldn't force it, just because Mitch Marner is a very good player, although he's not that good in the playoffs. But someone just offering you like a okay second pairing defenseman, a decent middle sixer, and a first round pick, I'm not sure you're taking that if you're Brad Treliving. So yeah, I understand they should try to get him traded. Don't get me wrong, but if the offer isn't there, I think people might be overestimating the market overall for Mitch Marner. Now, when looking at potential trades involving Mitch Marner, this comes to us from FSmart17. He says, Petrangelo to the Leafs. Yeah, you've heard some rumors about the Vegas Golden Knights maybe being interested in a Mitch Marner. A Mitch Marner and Petrangelo plus some other assets, I would assume. For a Mitch Marner, that could make sense. I think it would be a little bit short-sighted on the Toronto Maple Leafs front, considering Petrangelo is like 33, 34 years old versus Mitch Marner still in his prime. But I would understand them thinking a veteran guy that has basically been the number one defenseman for 2 Stanley Cup winning teams. I understand why that would be appealing, and Alex Petrangelo is kind of a Brad Treliving kind of player. And when looking at Vegas, this would be a fucking slam dunk, dude, considering they do have Hanifin and Theodore. Maybe neither of them are like legit number one defensemen. I think Theodore is actually kind of a stud, but those are 2 very good top pair defensemen. So you're perfectly fine trading Roy Petrangelo and then partnering him with a Jack Eichel, who's another disgruntled star that they got, and immediately he became a fucking stud. So when looking at it, a Petrangelo for Marner swap would be very interesting, and I think Vegas would obviously win that. C. Millies 87 says Laine and a first rounder and a B-level prospect is traded to the Leafs for Marner. Now, when looking at this, I'm not sure Mitch Marner would waive his no movement clause to go to Columbus. That's not really the most. You definitely would for Vegas, a high-level contender like that. Warm market. Not sure he's frothing at the mouth to go with Columbus. I think in terms of value, it makes some sense. The Columbus might have to actually retain some money even on that, even with them attaching those picks. I just think $8.7 million for Patrick Laine is a bit rich. But yeah, that would be pretty solid. I think the Leafs would probably opt for more of an NHL-ready player. Maybe Boone Jenner and Patrick Laine for a Mitch Marner, because Boone Jenner's on a very good contract and would immediately help them win now. But the framework of that does make some sense. Next up, I don't really know how to pronounce that, Dupuis 20 says, Montreal signs Marchessault short term. Now, when looking at it, Jonathan Marchessault, obviously a free agent, 42 goals last season, really broke out in a goddamn career year. I definitely understand this if you're looking for Marchessault. He gets to go home to Quebec. He's obviously from French Canada. Montreal, are they quite ready to make that big of a splash? This would be maybe, I could see Marchessault signing a 2 to 3 year deal or a 4-year deal with an actual contender, and then going back to Montreal, say when he's 37, 38, really a veteran that is still a high-level player. I'm not sure for both parties. Marchessault probably, although he did win a Stanley Cup, I'm sure he's very hungry to get another one. I'm not sure he's going to run to a team that probably isn't going to make the playoffs next year. Maybe we'll make it the year after and won't really be contending until, I'd say, at least at the earliest, the 2026, 2027 season. I don't love the idea of Montreal throwing a bag at a veteran quite yet, but when looking, it worked out. Claude Giroux was very productive in terms of helping development, but in a situation like that, didn't really work out in terms of team success. So I'd probably wait another year for the Montreal Canadiens to really go out and start being aggressive in free agency. I wouldn't hate it because Jonathan Marchessault is a fantastic player and would be a great veteran leader for that group. But I'm not quite sold that this is the offseason that they kind of make some win now moves in terms of getting veteran guys. Aiden says, Kings sell this offseason. I get what you're saying, just considering it seems pretty dire in Kings Nation right now, considering 2 years ago, you lose in 7 to the Oilers. Last year, 6. This year, 5. And there were some blowouts mixed in with that. You're not really too bullish on your future going forward. But I think after they did the PLD trade, and considering they're not going to buy out PLD, they said that. Rob Blake has said that publicly. I think that was kind of a point of no return. You cannot try to blow it up, sell with this core right now, considering the fact, yes, Quinn Byfield's young, yes, Brant Clark's young, but beyond that, PLD is like your other youngest player in terms of an impact guy. Jordan Spence is actually pretty young as well. But when looking at it, Doughty, 33, Kopitar, 36, Fiala is like 28, 29. Kempe's around the same age. Danault's not young by any stretch. Arvidsson, 31. They need to be aggressive in terms of being win now until you got to just ride it out until Doughty and Kopitar are kind of washed up. And then you maybe go through a retool with Byfield and Clark. But I think you can make the goaltending needs to be addressed this offseason in terms of maybe getting a potential number one. I wouldn't run it back with Cam Talbot. So I think that this LA Kings team, they got to be somewhat aggressive in terms of this current market. Even after flopping on the PLD trade, there's not really an avenue for them to do some type of retool with how old their core is. So I'm not sure that they're going to be selling this offseason. Liam McKay says, Chychrun stays with the Sens, and this is obviously a very interesting situation considering he has 1 year left at only $4.6 million. I can see him staying on the team. I could see him being on the team next season, but I think an extension would have to be in place. When looking at it, a pending guy, are you going to run out Chychrun? Yes, maybe you could trade him at the deadline if it goes wrong, but I think they're most likely he's either going to have a contract this summer or he's going to be on a different team. I cannot see Ottawa risk getting burnt on Chychrun because the other thing is, like, yes, maybe you trade him at the deadline, but if Ottawa starts out good and they're somewhat in a wild card race and then you sell Chychrun, I don't think you're going to sell Chychrun at the deadline if your team's doing that well. So it's a tricky situation, and I agree that they probably need to either trade him or give him an extension. But with their already current situation, although I think the Sanderson deal is going to age fantastic and Shabbat, when healthy, is around $7-8 million defenseman, are you going to be paying 3 defensemen around $8 million? That's a bit rich for me. So I think they're probably going to end up trading Jacob Chychrun, maybe re-sign him. Next up, Matt says the Devils don't get a star goalie. They settle for middling goaltending, and Fitz is fired for next summer. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm hearing rumors about Jacob Markstrom and all that. I wouldn't love that personally, considering he's making $6 million in the next 2 seasons if they retain money. But there definitely is a possibility where he just runs it back with Jake Allen and Akira Schmidt as the backup, considering he acquired Jake Allen fully knowing that he had a year left on his contract. It wasn't just a 1-year thing. I think they are going to do something in the goalie market. Is it going to be a massive splash? I'm not so sure, but I think the Devils definitely do something. Chicago from Noah. Hawks trade the 18th pick and more to Carolina for Necas. Lock him up on an 8 to 9 year deal at 8 years. Now, when looking at this, I can get behind this. Now, I don't think that they are going to do this because I think they moved up in the draft, obviously, to select a guy that they had in mind that will be there at 18, maybe not at 19. That'd be weird if they just flipped that pick in order to trade for Necas. But I do like the idea of Carolina bringing in a guy like Marty Necas that is only 25 years old. When looking at it, there's rumors about Jake Gensel. I don't like that, considering he's 29. He's going to want an 8-year deal. I get that he'd be good for Bedard's development, but in 4 or 5, like when Chicago's actually contending, that contract probably will be net negative versus Necas, 25 years old. You lock him up 7-8 years. Even at the end of that, he's only 32, 33 years old. So I can get behind that for some type of assets. I think Carolina would want a roster player as well as assets, considering they're still trying to win. But I can definitely understand the appeal of Chicago going out and getting a guy in their mid-20s to help Bedard overall grow. Next up, this is another Olmark one. Olmark goes to Philly from Brennan as a heart replacement for Joel Farabee. And yeah, I think the main concern I have with the Philadelphia Flyers, I know Torts is going to coach him up at 5-on-5, even though they don't have the most roster talent. But when looking at them with Carter Hart versus without Carter Hart last season, once he left the team in late January, you all guys obviously know why, they really fell apart. So maybe they go after a goaltender. Now, I wouldn't trade him for Joel Farabee because Joel Farabee is only like 25 years old. He has multiple years left at only like $5 million. He's on a fantastic goddamn contract. So I'm not sure I would do that for Philly. That would be a slam fucking dunk for Boston if they got Joel Farabee for their backup goaltender, even though Olmark's a stud. So I'm not sure I would pull the trigger on that if I was Philly quite yet. I don't think that they're probably going to just see what they have in Sam Ersson and Fedotov, considering they are young. I'm not sure they're going to be aggressive in terms of trading one of their better forwards and one of their younger forwards that's on a fantastic deal. And then lastly, Henry says Patrick Kane signs a 1-year minimum with the New Jersey Devils. I just want to see this happen. Ranger fans to lose their goddamn minds that Patrick Kane is heading to the New York Rangers. And yeah, I could understand this if they want some more goal scoring. I think they definitely should be more focused on probably defense scoring. Goaltending, don't get me wrong, but goal scoring, the offense was fine last year, but maybe you want some more oomph. Maybe you don't trust Dawson Mercer on that second line right wing. Kane, Jack Hughes, and Bratt are kind of smaller guys. There would be some concern with that, but maybe you just shift the lines around to kind of protect them. Would be very interesting to see Patrick Kane on the other side of the Hudson River, and I would definitely be for that. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these hot takes? Drop any scorching hot takes that you have below. I'm just really hoping that Ehlers heads to my New York Islanders. I will literally be popping bottles if that happens, because that is a realistic trade. Not saying we're winning the Stanley Cup if that does happen, but I think the New York Islanders would be a safe playoff team with solid Sorokin goaltending and getting Ehlers and getting off one of the bad contracts. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And I'll be seeing you in the next one.